Video describes the 2024 paper, Methods to Compare Sites Concerning a Category's Change During Various Time Intervals by Bilintoh, Pontius, and Zhang, published in the journal GIScience and Remote Sensing. The paper presents a new methodology called trajectory analysis, which analyzes a category's gross loss and gross change across multiple time intervals. This method is especially useful to compare among sites. Here are example data to illustrate the concepts. Each of the 12 rows shows a particular observation denoted by its ID number. Each of the 5 columns show the time points labeled T0 to T4. The 5 time points form 4 time intervals. The years from 2000 to 2005 show that the first 3 time intervals have a duration of 1 year, while the 4th time interval has a duration of 2 years. A value of 0 indicates absence of a category, and a 1 indicates presence of a category. Each observation is one of 8 trajectories. The first 3 observations begin with presence, then lose exactly once to end with absence. This first trajectory is called loss without alternation. The next 2 observations begin with absence, then gain exactly once to end in presence. This second trajectory is called gain without alternation. Observation ID 6 begins with presence, then loses, then gains, then loses to end in absence. This third trajectory is called loss with alternation. Alternation is a pattern across a time sequence that has both loss and gain. Observation ID 7 begins with absence, gains, loses, then gains to end in presence, which is a trajectory called gain with alternation. Observation 8 begins with presence, loses, then gains to end in presence. This trajectory is called all alternation loss first, because all of the change is alternation while the first change is loss. Observation 9 begins with absence, gains, loses, gains, and loses to end in absence. This trajectory is called all alternation gain first. Observation 10 is an observation called stable presence, while observation 11 is called stable absence. Observation 12 is eliminated from the analysis because the pixel at time 0 is not applicable, thus the entire time series for that pixel is eliminated from the analysis. Unified size is the union of observations that have a presence at any time point. In this example data, the unified size is 10. The next slide shows results in terms of annual change as a percent of the unified size. The unified size provides a way to express change as a percent of a region that is a constant across time intervals. The size of stable absence does not influence the unified size. Trajectory analysis generates this stacked bar plot. The horizontal axis shows each of the time intervals across the temporal extent. The width of each bar indicates the duration of the time interval. Thus, the bar for the 2003 to 2005 time interval is double the width of the other bars. The vertical axis shows annual gross change as a percentage of the unified size. The dashed line shows gross gains averaged across the temporal extent, while the dotted line shows gross losses averaged across the temporal extent. Average gross loss is slightly larger than average gross gain. Bars of gross gain rise above 0 on the vertical axis, and bars of gross losses fall below. Time interval 2001 to 2002 shows gross gain of 10 and gross loss of 50%. Time interval 2002 to 2003 shows a gross gain of 50% and a gross loss of 10%. Thus, the speed of gross change during those 2 time intervals is identical. However, the 2 intervals differ in whether that change is gross loss or gross gain. The colors within the stacked bar plot show how the gross losses and gross gains derive from the trajectories. During 2001 to 2002, a portion of the gross loss derives from the light blue trajectory of gain with alternation, because any alternation derives from gain during one time interval and loss during another time interval. Figure summarizes all the gross changes during the time series. The previous graphic, the vertical axis is annual gross change as a percentage of unified size. The figure shows 3 components of change. Quantity measures the absolute net change between time point 0 and the last time point. This will either be a quantity loss or gain, which the legend specifies. Exchange measures simultaneous gain at some locations and loss at other locations between time point 0 and the final time point. For example, a pixel in one part of the study area transitions from absence at 2000 to presence at 2005, and then a pixel in another part of the study area transitions from presence at 2000 to absence at 2005. Alternation measures pairs of gain and loss at an observation through the time series. For example, a pixel transitions from presence at 2002 to absence at 2003 and back to presence at 2004. The authors used trajectory analysis to compare three marsh areas on the east coast of the United States: the Plum Island ecosystems in Massachusetts, which we will refer to as PI, the Georgia coastal ecosystems, which we will refer to as GCE, and the Virginia Coast Reserve, which we will refer to as VCR. The data are raster maps that show the presence or absence of marsh at each of the 3 time points. However, the sites are not consistent in dates of the time points, nor the size of the spatial extent, nor the amount of marsh within the spatial extent. Nevertheless, trajectory analysis allows comparison among the 3 sites by using the concept of unified size. Trajectory analysis generates these maps by overlaying the 3 time points for each site. There are 6 trajectories shown in the legend. There are only 3 time points, so the trajectories of loss with alternation and gain with alternation do not exist. The maps show where the changes occur, but not when the changes occur. Trajectory analysis generates these graphics that show when the changes occur. Pi has more loss than gain during each time interval, thus the gross loss line is farther from the time axis than the gross gain line. The quantity component reflects a net loss across the temporal extent. Alternation accounts for about half of the change during the temporal extent. GCE shows the gross loss and gross gain lines are almost equidistant from the time axis. This results in a quantity component that is nearly 0, indicating trivial net change from the beginning to the end of the interval. Here, exchange dominates, driven by equal contributions from loss without alternation and gain without alternation. VCR shows greater gross gain than gross loss. Thus, the gross gain line is further from the time axis than the gross loss line. The quantity component reflects a net gain, which is the largest quantity change among the 3 sites. Quantity, exchange, and alternation are more evenly distributed than in the other sites. The sums of 3 components of quantity, exchange, and alternation show the speed in change. Change is fastest in Pi and slowest in GCE in terms of change as a percentage of the unified size. The concept of the unified size facilitates comparison among the 3 sites. Pontius and Bilintoh have set up a special issue of the journal Land for Applications of Trajectory Analysis. Please see the contributed manuscripts and/or send your manuscript to Professor Pontius at rpontius@clarku.edu. This video has provided an overview of the paper entitled Methods to Compare Sites Concerning a Category's Change Through Various Time Intervals by Bilintoh, Pontius, and Zhang. We introduced the concept of unified size, the 8 trajectories, and quantity, exchange, and alternation. We hope that you have a better understanding of the value of these methods for comparing sites that may differ in size and temporal extent to obtain meaningful results. We thank our funders at the United States National Science Foundation through the Long-Term Ecological Research Program and the National Aeronautics and Space Administration through the Land Use and Land Cover Change Program. Use this QR code to obtain free software in the form of an ARM package from Bilintoh's GitHub site.